all of this is to do with understanding ourselves better, right? So we use running. You talked about, how do you get over this thing of running? How do you motivate yourself to do this 42 kilometers? You've got to understand that, look, you know what? You might over 4 months train and do this full marathon. But if after that you become a couch potato again, what was the point of that? Was it just to say, I've run a marathon? It's like big deal. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people who have run marathons. So you're just nothing special. The point is, how do you become a better version of yourself? And aren't you potentially a worse version of yourself? If you did something challenging, you achieved success, but you actually went back.
To begin with, I would like to know that how did you start running? Because I have always seen you as a coach. I've never seen, your own transition and never heard anywhere. So I would love to hear from you itself.
I guess, there are, perhaps two types of people. There are the type that were always sort of runners, but they just got caught up with life. And so they were sporty, perhaps just ran around as part of sports as a youngster, and then get caught up in the normal sort of corporate rat race. And then there are the type that didn't really particularly enjoy running back then. They might have been good at sports, but they didn't enjoy the running component of sports.
Yeah.
And I think I'm more of the former. I was not, particularly good at sports. And in school, even running tends to be short distance. And of course, you don't have, never mind even half marathons or 10Ks in my days in school. And I went to one of the best schools in the city where I'm in now, which is Mumbai, one of the best schools. And even there, the sports day, I think we had 100 meters, but I think if there was 200 meters, I don't remember it, but there may have been. Okay. So it was basically, it was always short distance and sprinting. So it didn't strike you that you were actually a good endurance athlete. Of course, now when I look back, I realized that, hang on, when we played all kinds of other field sports, I was a guy who could run back and forth from one goal to the next. And, not everybody could do that. Okay. So that's sort of history. And then, like if you come forward another, from the age of 15 to the age of 40, it suddenly struck me that, life's too short to not be fit, and I should get fit. And I ended up being in Mumbai, and one of the few things you can do here, given that it's an extremely crowded city with not very great infrastructure, is you can run. And you can run in just about every part of the world. And that's what's beautiful about running, that you don't need anything. Even if you live in a part of the world where lots of other things are possible, you might sometimes go on holiday somewhere where, the only thing you can do is get up early in the morning in that crowded city and run for an hour or so before the city wakes up. Yeah. So that's how I kind of got into it, just as a means to get fit. And it was only because I continued doing it that as time went on, I realized that relative to others in the population of my sort of age and gender, that I was an outlier. So that's probably kind of, as a quick overview of how I got into things.
Sure. So were you like a overweight guy, or was it like something, you were just something you wanted to do apart from just a normal regime of going to the gym or something like that? Was it something you looked at running as? So
I guess when you're busy as a father of two, a husband, a son-in-law, a busy senior employee in a business, one of the directors of the firm, then you look for something which is efficient, time efficient, and you don't have time to go off, and even if you could afford membership of a club, and you don't have the time to arrange a game of squash or whatever it might be that you play. Yeah. So that's the reason I guess I sort of always naturally running as a very time efficient activity. Yeah. Whether I was overweight or not is easy to tell when if you were to Google and look up older pictures of me. So relative to then, or relative to now, I was clearly overweight. Yeah. I think sometimes people say, oh, you were not really overweight then, but I was 30 kilos heavy. I had 30 kilos more fat on my body than I do now.
Wow.
And 30 kilos isn't a small amount of fat.
Absolutely.
So I think the key thing is that I think to a large extent, running has been one of the things that helps me keep that fat off. But I don't think it's by any means, the only thing or the biggest thing, because as you look around you, you'll come across a lot of people who have been running for a number of years, but they might lose a little bit of fat, but they don't necessarily either manage to keep it off completely or keep reducing their body fat percentage. So I think that's a key thing for people to remember or note, pay attention to.
Something which you would say, this happened because you were a runner. This happened to you because, it just made you realize that something was not there, as a person you were earlier.
There was this time maybe about 8-9 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, where people would sometimes say that, oh, you can be fat and still be fit. And that's definitely not the case. People would say, you know what, in fact, there's still some guidance out there saying that if you're going to be slim, but not active, that's quite risky. And you're better off being overweight, but someone who's very active. And I don't know if that relative comparison does much justice, because neither situation is good. Because fat itself is harmful to the body when there's excess fat on the body. And we shouldn't have that. So I think that's a wrong thing for people to conclude that, oh, I'm overweight, but you know what, I run a lot, so that's okay. That's definitely not the case. I think in my case, and this is what I encourage everybody to do, is to understand that you don't need to run to be fit. And you could be extremely fit without running. And it doesn't have to be me saying that, right? You look at the world of sports, there are so many amazing sports people, and they don't run beyond whatever little they might have to do to, as part of the sport, right? I mean, very simply, cyclists don't run and swimmers don't run, and someone who plays badminton is extremely active, but doesn't have to run as much in terms of total distance. So you don't have to be a distance runner. So I think that's a key thing to note, that you've got to first make this decision. Do I need to run? If I'm going to run, how am I going to run right? And run so that I can run, and for running to work for me. It shouldn't be that you run because somehow you believe you need to run without thinking about it hard. And then you start running, but you don't give it much thought, and then you get injured or whatever else might happen, or you don't kind of keep it up. And then you give up your whole plan to be fit because you thought that running was what you needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. To know from a sense that someone wants to build on it. It's not like that they don't want to build on it, but the whole idea of, exerting, and like you recently mentioned in your implementation video as well, that, it's always very tough to be able to implement it and make it your own routine. So I'm just trying to understand from that point that how can you break that? How it is, it is very difficult with the time also we are in right now, as in like COVID. There were people who were very regular runners, and they were into running, maybe 50 kilometers every week. They were very regular. But because of the whole situation right now, and work from home is getting a little more challenging and more than what it was, earlier. So I think the balance is lost completely.
This is the thing, you've kind of got to step back and have that maturity and think that, so I always sort of saw running as like you have a relationship with someone of, like a romantic partner. When you first meet them, you're really excited. You're like, wow, you're thinking about them all the time, and you want to meet them all the time, and you want to spend more time with them, right? So you can see the equivalent in running, right? You think about running all the time. You talk to everybody about running. You plan everything around your running and you want to run more and more and more. But you've got to have this sort of long-term maturity perspective and say, look, this is something I want to do long-term because this is something good for me. It's just like, I want to be with this person long-term because they're good for me. So I've got to face that, and I've got to understand there are always sort of ups and downs. So in this situation where we know that this isn't a situation where we're going to be stuck indoors for the rest of our lives, the important thing at that point would have been to step back and say that, look, my goal is that in 3 years' time, when there is no COVID or pandemic around, or no lockdowns that come to an end, because it's not clear we won't have any more lockdowns. The question is, how do you plan for that whole period? And then to tell yourself that my goal is literally to be fit. And one of the things is to run this long distance. So when I can get back into running, I will again build up again, because there's only so much you can run inside your house or even in the compound of your building. So is to A, have that long-term perspective, and B, also to think back that, look, the great thing is that unlike when I first started running, where I needed to really work hard to even get up to 5 kilometers and then get up to 8 kilometers and then get up to 10 and then 15. The good thing now is that when I do get back into it, it's going to take a lot less time, because I've had so many years of running history behind me. And I am more mindful of all the other things that I do for my health. So I think putting all of those things together, and then to just say that, look, I'm going to have a timetable and a plan, just like I did the first time I started running. Right? Often we feel that just because we've run 10 races and we've been running for 5 years, and we've run whatever up to 50K races and things, and therefore we kind of know it all. We don't need to plan. We'll just go out and do it. And like I say, if failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So you've got to have a very, very specific plan. I mean, when I got out of this recent lockdown that we've had in India, I had a very specific plan as to how I was going to go back from pretty much not running at all to getting back to my sort of equilibrium sort of distance of running in terms of individual runs or weekly mileage. There was a very, very specific, well thought out plan. And it's a plan, but sometimes it can go out of whack because of this, that, and the other. But the point is to have a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you say you should have a plan, do you have anything to add in a sense that someone just want to start with maybe tomorrow itself, that they want to do this and they should have certain kilometers or certain distance, certain mix of like fartlek and sprint or maybe I would say that like long runs, everything. What do you say about that? How do you plan it? How much, and your weight training as well?
So so when it comes to running, I think although one can have a cookie cutter plan, and many of these sort of plans exist, I don't believe that it's necessarily the best way for an individual to progress, unless the cookie cutter plan is sort of dynamic and it adjusts based on your own ability to stick with the plan. So for instance, if the plan tells you to go out and run for 4 times a week and gives you some mileage to run on day 1, on day 2, day 3, day 4, and then if you aren't able to do day 2, how does it adjust day 3, right? I think a plan needs to have that. But what I just say that, and therefore it's difficult to give very, very specific advice. I never do that, right? Each of the persons that I mentor and as part of the mentoring, running coaching becomes part of that. So each person's distance and target pace and the kind of running they're going to do is definitely a function of their own ability, their history, and simple things like how much they've slept in the last week, any illnesses they've had, how much mileage they've done. If they've not done any mileage, how should they get back into it? But they want to get back into it, and they're like, they're procrastinating. They're feeling guilty that they're not running, but yet they know that they should, and then they want to go out. I'd say that, hey, you know what? So today, for instance, right now, we're speaking today, it's a Saturday, and often people like to go out and run on a Sunday. So I'd say that, look, standard bit of advice, just set the alarm. Don't set it to wake up too early. In fact, don't set an alarm is the best thing. Whenever you wake up, and you happen to wake up anytime, say between 5 in the morning and say 7:30 in the morning, just get up, put your shoes on, don't even plan to run. Just wear your running equipment and go out and walk in the area where others might run. Right? That's it. Just show up on day 1. And then that would get you going better for, say tomorrow is Sunday. Then when you get up on Tuesday, do the same thing. But you know what? Maybe try and run a little bit. Run for, don't think about distance, but if you want to think about distance, great, but just look to sort of do a slow jog for 5 minutes. I wouldn't even say run a kilometer, just jog for 5 minutes. If you want, walk, run for 5 minutes. But the point is to just show up, that's the thing. And then on Thursday, do the same thing and build up from there.
Yeah. So do you feel that running or the fitness industry itself, it's a huge commodity, because it's like there are so many things right now going on with the kind of a world we are right now, and it is more of seen as a commodity than actually the real cause or the truth. But in a sense that it really gets very overwhelming for an audience to really choose what is right for them, unless there isn't anyone is a coach who can guide you in person. So what do you say on that?
So to the extent that people are excited about running, then there will always be someone else on the other side who tries to provide them a product or a service, a paid product or a paid service that will try and do something to satisfy part of that need, right? So, it's going from bottom to top. Someone selling shoes, someone selling special laces for shoes, someone selling special socks, someone selling special compression socks, coming higher up the body, special shorts, and, special, armbands for their phone, and so on. So there's a lot to sell, and I'm not saying that doesn't serve a purpose for someone who needs it, and those are not useful. And similarly, different food things, different drinks, and so on, right? Yeah. So technology, like I just bought this wonderful sports watch a couple of months ago, and I love it. So like this, there will be a lot of things out there. So the question again is to stop and think and to tell yourself that, look, I'm running as a method to get fit. And in order to get the most out of my running, I want to make sure I run right, which means running in the right form and technique and the right mileage. Yeah. And as part of that, given that I have so many other things to do with my day, these are the other things that I need. So now let me step back and say, given that these are all the other things that I need, right? And that I really know I need, not that someone's telling me that I need this, what are the things that are available, and sort of to do it that way. So I see no problem with someone trying to make money out of a demand out there. Yeah. Right? I don't think that's the problem. I just feel that, okay, let's step back again. Running is, humans have always run. We've not really run for recreation or even sport, by and large. Even in, and specifically in India, recreational running, although you and I are runners and we see this as a big thing that's happening, it's still a tiny fraction of a percentage of the population that runs, right? So it's still minuscule. It's minuscule to the point of being pathetically small, right? So the point is, we'd rather that people are fit, and a great way in a place like India, without having to spend money and given the population density, building lots of infrastructure for sports, everybody can go out there and run. Yeah. So to that extent, it's been great that over the last 15 years, in a very gradual way, starting off perhaps with the Mumbai Marathon, that this culture has built in for people to run. People live in cities, in tier 2 towns, in villages, etc., that have gotten up and realized that they can run to be fit. And it doesn't really need much. I think there is a lot of stuff around, because it's not like, say something like, I don't know, like archery or rifle shooting, right? There isn't that much around, those are sports. There's not much around in the media and not too much commercial pressure. Yeah. Right. And there is for this. So the thing is to just step back and say, what is it that I need as an individual? Yeah. What is it that I'm going to listen to? Yeah. All I can tell you is that I specifically am a marketing person's worst nightmare. It's extremely difficult to sell something to me. And if I need something, I'm definitely going to get it. But I rarely kind of give in to, commercial pressures that you need this and you need that. So I think that's something that everybody should do. Step back and ask themselves, what is it that I really need? The thing that you need is to be fit. That's what you need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you say fit, how do you define fit? What is your definition of being fit?
So more than, my definition of being fit, which is basically what we might consider the scientific definition of being fit, is what something that, say, the American College of Sports Medicine might use for fitness, right? So you've got health-based measures of fitness and skills-based measures of fitness. So if you think about health-based measures of fitness, then you've got cardiorespiratory endurance, muscular strength, body composition, flexibility, right? These 5 things. And to a large extent, something like running gives you different component or different amounts of each of these. So perhaps doesn't give you too much in terms of muscular strength. Running itself, it'll give you muscular endurance and cardiorespiratory endurance. It'll give you flexibility if you do the stretching around it. And just running will tend to make you flexible in most parts. And it'll help you perhaps keep your body fat down. And on the skills-based measure, I think it also does quite well, because the skills-based measures you could think of as balance, speed, reaction time, coordination, agility, power, these sorts of things. And again, running is good for this, especially if you run in cities and villages in India, where you've got to constantly look out for stuff. You've got to balance on yourself in areas which are not so well laid out in terms of infrastructure, right? Like in Mumbai, when I run in the neighborhood I live in, I have to avoid potholes. I have to avoid cow dung. I have to run on the road because there is no proper pavement, right? So I have to look out for traffic. I have to, there's a lot to think about. So running can definitely help with all of that, compared to, say, someone who, and again, I don't want to make a comparison as in you have to do this versus that. You can do both. But I remember when I, say about, 12, 13 years ago, when I started to run, my goal was just to be fit. And as part of that goal to be fit, I had this thought very clearly in my head that I want to be fit like a warrior, right? That was my goal. And a warrior should be able to run and jump and move fast and be strong. So I started running and cycling and going to the gym to do strength training, all 3 of these things. And I've continued them, right? So for instance, today I did some strength training, and tomorrow morning I will run. And I will cycle as much as I can to commute and things like that. But the key point is that in doing all of these things, we have better balance. And then we sort of stay fit overall. If all I had done was say, look, I just want to have a lot of muscles, I could have gone to the gym and just become bulky and muscular. But I'm not sure it would have helped with my cardiorespiratory endurance. I don't really know if it would have helped so much with flexibility. And I don't think it would have helped much at all with reaction speed and balance and coordination and things like that. So, different things will add different components or different degrees to these different components of fitness.
Got it. Understood. Nice. So when you say, it's about building on more on the endurance on the other aspect as well, not just muscular, so there is a lot of challenge with fatigue. And I think when you are a runner and when you are doing a certain distance every single day, so I remember recently reading one of your blogs where it was more on how we can take care of it by our food. But since I'm a vegan, I would like to know about this, that there wasn't any mention about inflammatory, like products, there is like dairy or other products, meat, there is a lot of inflammation. So how can you take care of that, being a runner or being any endurance athlete?
So first thing, I think it's key, it's key to understand that inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing. So we have to distinguish between acute and chronic inflammation, and to distinguish between sort of localized inflammation and systemic inflammation. So for instance, if I go to the gym and I decide to really work my upper body really hard, and say I'm doing something like very specific in a session, and it's working a very specific group of muscles because I've just decided as a thing to make my journey interesting for a few weeks, I'm going to do just that. Then what I have is I definitely have inflammation once I finish that session at the gym. And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. And it'll be local, it won't be systemic. I won't have inflammation in my entire body in every part of it. So that's one thing. So then the question becomes, well, do I want this all the time? No, I want that inflammatory response, but I want it to go away as my body recovers and I get stronger or fitter or whatever it might be that I'm trying to get out of that session. And in order to do that, what I've got to make sure that in the 24, 48, 72 hours after that session, I have appropriate support to my body that brings inflammation down. So one of the best ways is to, once you've decided that now you're in a period where you need to bring that inflammation down, is to just have deep sleep, right? So if you sleep, that's going to help, and so on, right? So that you might have a cold shower or sort of meditate, etc. When it comes to food, clearly there are foods that bring inflammation down, and there are foods that are inflammatory. And like you mentioned, in general, foods, animal products are pro-inflammatory, and plant products are anti-inflammatory. And again, I'm speaking in a very general sense, and therefore, it should be clear. Even if you look back at research publications going back to the early 20th century, scientists have done research showing that plant-based athletes had better recovery times and therefore better performance over the long term. Because if you recover faster, you can train more often. Right? If you take long to recover, you can't train as much or train as often. So you're not going to improve as fast and get much better, right? So they've shown, as up to like 100 years ago, or based foods eating athletes had better performance over many, many months of time. So for sure, I tell anybody who's contemplating improving on their diet, I'd say that to move closer towards being more vegan would be much better for them from the perspective of, from many perspectives. But since you asked very specifically, from the perspective of athletic performance. And sometimes people will latch on to what I think is perhaps a component of what someone says that may not necessarily apply to them. So it's not impossible that if you're not paying attention to your diet, that someone who isn't vegan and ends up eating a lot of animal products can potentially get more protein into their body than someone who is vegan but is also not paying too much attention to their intake, right? So just an important footnote to make is that you could be drinking Coke and eating French fries, and that's being vegan, right? So that's not healthy, it's not good for you. So being a Coke drinking, fries eating vegan is of no use, right? Then you're probably better off eating tandoori chicken every day and drinking a glass of milk, right? And you might be better off as someone who goes to the gym and lifts a lot of weights and things like that. You'd have better performance. But is that really better for you in the long run? It's definitely not better for animals. It's not better for the planet. So how do you do things so that your health improves over time, as does the health of the planet, and with less cruelty towards animals and things like that? I think that's very important. It's pointless, you and me getting stronger, fitter, faster if the planet is worse off, right? What's the point of that?
Absolutely.
Right? Because it doesn't make sense to me, at least. I'm not here living just on my own on this planet, and I don't care about anybody else or anything else. Not at all, right? That's not how, at least that's not how I am. I'm not going to do something so selfish that it really harms a lot of other people or a lot of other things. Not just in this point in time, but future generations too. So that's sort of the way I kind of look at it. And I'm not saying that somebody who isn't thinking about it as a bad person, they're just not thinking about it. And to not think is not necessarily the smartest thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a valid point. So, I would say, I want to bring back to the same thing of, because you are athlete or because you're a runner, sometimes there is a lot of monotony in your own training and in your way of training. So, I would like to emphasize more that how do you take care of yourself that you don't get bored in the process, you enjoy, and you still are able to achieve your goals as well. Maybe, you want to do 42 kilometers next year and you start training right away, but you want to train and you want to enjoy it. You don't want to lose the process and you just be there. So how do you take care of that? And I would love to know more on especially the boredom.
it so happened that not accidentally, but I ran on somebody else's bib for my first race ever. It wasn't a full marathon. They just knew I had started running. I had no idea what a marathon was. And they said, hey, there's this Mumbai marathon happening. Do you want to go for it? And I think it's so many years ago that I won't get disqualified now. But I ran on someone else's bib. This is about 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this race thing, I kind of like this, right? It's going in this big group of people because I never run with other people before. So I registered for the Mumbai full marathon the next year. Right? That was my first race ever I'd registered for. I trained for it and I did it, right? And again, I trained like a geek. I got a book. I read it from cover to cover a couple of times and I followed it exactly. And from nothing to within 8 weeks, I think I was running 28 kilometers. So I was just following the timetable. So it was something along those lines. Now, I realized as I then started mentoring people a few years after that not everybody is like me. So for me to tell people, look, I did this, so you can too, and what's the big deal about getting bored, doesn't make sense. So perhaps it's more useful to talk about how I mentor people to get to their goals, because that's more relevant, right? So what are the things that I've learned over time? And what I'd say is that, like very, very specifically, all of this is about our mind and how we think about things. So and again, it comes back to this whole thing of an implementation gap. Each person is different. So I know that there are people who are naturally more disciplined. I know there are people who are naturally more systematic. I know there are people who are naturally more scientific. I know there are people who naturally have more faith in a system. So each person is different. There is a spectrum. So for me, I'm what you might call an extreme believer in the potential of what nature can do. So I practice certain things that there isn't even much published evidence for. And I'm collecting data myself and I can see how I'm able to improve.
Okay.
And then there are people for whom you give them reams and reams of scientific evidence and they still won't do what's logically correct thing to do. So it comes down to understanding a person's mindset and to understand that people are not linear. We respond to certain environmental cues, we respond to feedback, we respond to positive encouragement and motivation. We don't like excessive criticism, we like constructive criticism. So what I tend to do is get each person to make progress in whatever it is that they're doing. And the people I mentor are doing a whole range of things, from doing distance running to taking professional exams where they need to study for many, many months to pass an exam and to keep them on track, right? And to put all of these things together, because it's ultimately about behavior modification. It's about setting up the right, infrastructure or plan. And so like a key thing. So I find it quite surprising when I talk to even experienced runners that they don't keep track of their running history and their training history. They'll, if they happen to want to check it, they'll go on the website of the smartwatch that they own, and they'll kind of look up their history. But you ask me, and I can tell you for the last many years, on any day that I ran, what time I woke up, what time I ran, whom I ran with, where I ran, what distance I did, what my pace was, what the weather was like, and more recently over the last couple of years, what the temperature was like, etc. All of that is logged. I can tell you those things. I can understand my running. And ultimately, all of this is to do with understanding ourselves better, right? So we use running. You talked about how do you get over this thing of running? How do you motivate yourself to do this 42 kilometers? You've got to understand that, look, you know what? You might over 4 months train and do this full marathon.
Yeah.
But if after that you become a couch potato again, what was the point of that? Was it just to say, I've run a marathon? It's like big deal. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people who've run marathons. So you're just nothing special. The point is, how do you become a better version of yourself? And aren't you potentially a worse version of yourself? If you did something challenging, you achieved success, but you actually went back, so you didn't learn anything from that hard work. You actually went back to being a couch potato. So that's the worst thing. It's like investing in education, but then not using it, right? It's like building a house and then not living in it.
Yeah.
Right? So the key thing to do is to say, look, this is a journey. I'm going to run this 42K because this is what's going to make me a better person and allow me to live a better life from then on. Only say 30 years old, I want to live to 100. So for the next 70 years, this experience of this 42K is going to be good for me.
Yeah.
Not when I'm 40, look back and say, when I was 30, I ran a 42K. Yeah, I don't run anything now, but hey, you know what? I had run a full marathon. Now I'm fat and overweight and I don't do any exercise, but it's not my fault. It's COVID, right? No, that's no good. I'm sorry, but I'm not saying you're a bad person. It's just you haven't thought through about how to use your time well.
Absolutely.
Right? And I say this because people don't realize this. They keep focusing on the money component of things. They're like, oh, I got to make money. I got to do this. And I'm like, you know what? You can always make money, but you're not going to get back this 10 years from 30 to 40. And if you lost these 10 years, now what are you going to do about the next 60 years if you live to 100? And of course, you won't live to 100 if you continue like this. You'll probably live to 70, but between the age of 50 and 70, you'll be pretty disabled because you'll have a lot of health problems. And I say this not to scare people. I say this because it is the truth. And if people don't wake up to this reality, they'll realize that what they think is fun and pleasure is very short-lived. And 20 years of pain is no fun. 20 years of fun will go by really fast, right? But if you live yourself well now, live well yourself now, then you will have many, many decades of good health and fun. So forget about this whole thing of I'm going to get bored till. No, it's not about running 42K in 4 months' time, right? That's your current milestone. Your goal is to hopefully live to 100 and beyond. Right. And so talk about being bored in 4 months. So,
absolutely.
I don't think I really answered your question, but it's because I wanted to pull us away in a different direction and think about how running should be used for long-term good health and long-term emotional good health and mental good health. It's pointless being an extremely good runner, but nobody likes being around you because you're just a pain in the ass, right? You're not nice to anybody, right? And then when you're older, also you're grumpy, right? And you talk about how you used to be an athlete. Like, I don't care what you did or what your grandfather did. Right? What are you doing today? Right? You're 75 years old and nobody likes being around you because you're grumpy. You should be 85, 90 years old, and I don't care what health problems you have. You should be a happy person around other people, right? Because nobody has time for grumpy people.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And I think that's a very, very valid point, because I think in the process, or, somewhere you just look for that short goal. It has to be looked beyond that. It can't be just right this moment kind of a thing. So so one book which you feel is your go-to book that you can go back and read every single day kind of a thing, or maybe that made you what you are today.
Like maybe coming to your primary agenda of running, I think sort of the best book that I ever saw on running training when I started off, which I used, is I think called Marathon Training for the Non-Runner.
Okay.
It basically takes you from nothing to a full marathon. So in that sense, that's one of my favorite books.
Sure.
But I think actually I've got a book here that I was reading sort of last summer, which I really like. And I'm not trying to plug his book, but it's
How to Live a Good Life. Awesome.
It's called How to Live a Good Life, and it's a wonderful book. So I read it about maybe 3 or 4 times. It's got my annotations all over it.
Nice.
And I've enjoyed reading that.
Sure, I can try that. And we'll definitely put that in a post. So yeah, I would like to, towards the end, this is my favorite question I always ask my guest, is 5 blessings you would say that is what you are today, or you can count on them every single day, your blessings.
So I think number one, definitely my parents. I think and this is something that I therefore also use in my guidance to others when it comes to parenting, is this whole idea that children won't do as you tell them to do, they'll do as you do, as they see you do.
Yeah.
So I think number one, my parents, because just observing how they live their lives has been fantastic. And they're definitely role models for me, even today. So, I could say that my father is the oldest person I mentor. He's in his 90th year. He's
Wow.
extremely fit and healthy. He's out every day. Every day in the last 6 months during COVID, he's been out, and he goes to the slums nearby to do vegetable shopping. And people are like shocked, but your dad goes out. I'm like, yeah, every single day. I might go out once or twice a week, but he's out every day.
Wow.
So, and the way he lives his life, and even today in his 90th year, he's looking for knowledge. He's often asking me about my opinion on certain things to do with health, etc. So that's number one. It's like my blessing to see my parents the way they are. Number two is, I guess, what one might call the sperm lottery, right? That you have your parents as they are, and people often think of that as therefore being to do with wealth. And all I can tell you is that I'm one of 4 children, and none of us got anything from our parents as such. A, they're still alive, but B, we were all sort of financially independent from a very young age. We didn't rely on our parents for anything. So wonderful. I think just having good education, right? I was lucky to have the opportunity for good education. And I think that's number 2. And number 3 is, I think over the last 7-8 years, I think the people I've mentored have been a fantastic blessing for me, because it's through their experiences and engaging with them that I've learned a lot about human beings. And that's been very good for me, because it's allowed me to be a better mentor to others. Absolutely. So it's an ongoing process, right? A teacher doesn't become a good teacher by going to teacher training school. They become a better teacher as they start teaching children. And I think I'm really grateful to everyone I've mentored for giving me this opportunity to engage with them. So I think that's the third blessing. A fourth blessing is the fact that by nature, I don't have a need for much. So I'm someone, therefore, who can be on their own for days on end. Even though I'm very happy to meet a lot of people and talk, and I can talk endlessly, I'm still very okay with not being in touch with anybody in terms of physically having to be with anybody. Yeah. And I think that's a really good thing, because it's allowed me to do things like do distance running. So I typically always run on my own. It's just once in a while I might engage with someone who runs at a similar pace as I do and say, yeah, let's meet up and go for a run. But we won't chat while we're running. Like we'll chat for a bit before and a bit after. So I think that's a like a good thing. Yeah. I think as a result of doing that, I've been able to get to where I am, where I'm able to give up things, seeing that I can get more in the future if I give up today. Wow. So for instance, if I give up food for 5 days, I know that it resets my immune system. So I will have a longer and healthier life. Right. Absolutely. And people who are not able to think like that want to eat many times a day, and it shortens their life. It's very easy to see. Just recently, someone I mentor, they said that their sister, who was only a bit older than they are, the metabolic age was in the late 40s, but their actual age is only 30 or something like that. Right. So whereas the person I mentor has a metabolic age the same as the chronological age. Right. So you can see how being able to give up will make a difference, and not being able to give up also makes a difference, because it goes in the opposite direction. So. Yeah, wonderful. So there has to be you have to strike a balance where you can give up and where you cannot. So yeah, wonderful. And I think these are
very extraordinary blessings, and I really hope you keep going ahead and keep inspiring many other people like me, and stay connected. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone add value. Thank you.